There are some movies that are so bad, they're good. The American Society of Magical Negroes isn't one of them. The American Society of Magical Negroes. Where to begin? You'd think it'd be hard to fail at making a satire about magical Negroes, but this film found a way. The film has a solid premise. It's a satire about the trope of the magical Negro, the black person who pops up in stories solely to help the white main character. Spike Lee popularized the phrase in the early 2000s in his criticism of films like The Green Mile and The Legend of Bagger Vance, but the concept for the magical Negro goes back much further. The magical part is somewhat of a misnomer, because a black character doesn't always have supernatural powers. However, it is the case that the magical Negro is simply there to support the white characters in the story. Should the black character also face issues, those are either secondary to the problems of the white character or completely ignored. This includes stories where the black character does have supernatural powers. Those powers are rarely used to help themselves, their families, or their people. The curious thing about the trope, the thing that makes it so perfect for being satirized, is that while the way it's done often appears racist, the intent behind it usually isn't. Sometimes the storytellers are actually trying to present black people in a positive light, but end up making the black character subservient to the white character. This is true even when the explicit purpose of the magical Negro is to confront the white character's racism. The impact racism had on the black character is mentioned only to serve changing the mind of the white character. It's not presented on its own merit. This kind of trope is begging for a satire, and it practically writes itself. It's one of those concepts that's so easy to do that the only way to screw it up is if you deliberately mess with it, and that brings us to the American Society of Magical Negroes. While writer-director Kobe Libby intended for the film to be a satirical dramedy that critiqued the anti-black racism in American society, what he delivered was an unfunny comedy, a boring drama, and an unintentional satire about anti-white racism in the black community. Instead of critiquing the trope of the magical Negro, showing how black people are forced to subvert their feelings and personalities to prevent white discomfort, Libby tells a story where the magical Negroes come across as racist, as assuming the worst about white people without any justification. The film never shows any of the horrible acts that supposedly result from white discomfort, but it does show a good deal of patronizing contempt from society towards white people and white people's obliviousness to the situation. In the film, we follow Aaron, an unconfident artist who makes sculptures out of yarn. At an art gallery, he tries to sell his work, but no one buys it. The gallery owner tells Aaron to talk to the last buyer, but the buyer assumes Aaron is a waiter and ignores him, handing Aaron an empty glass. Aaron takes the glass to the bar where he meets the bartender Roger, who takes pity on it. Later that night, Aaron throws away his sculpture and goes home. On his way, he stops at an ATM and bumps into a drunk white woman who asks him for help using the machine. She's so drunk that she forgets that she placed her card in the machine, panics, and starts screaming that someone stole her card. Her friends show up and accuse Aaron of stealing, but Roger steps in, uses magic to return everything to the woman, and then talks down the woman's friends. After this, Roger talks to Aaron and decides to get Aaron to join the American Society of Magical Negroes. He takes Aaron to a barbershop that acts as a hidden interest for the society. The society's goal is to protect black people from white violence by making sure that any white people feeling discomfort get appeased before they turn on a black person. Aaron watches various historical scenes of magical Negroes in action, both of which are plays on Bagger Vance and The Green Mile. Aaron's first mission is to help a white police officer regain his confidence and go clubbing. After that success, Aaron's training begins. Before going to the society, he goes to a coffee shop where he bumps into a woman named Lizzie, and they hit it off. He gets called away for the society and finds out about his new charge. He's assigned to help Jason, a white guy who works for the social media company Meatbox. He's suffering major depression, and Aaron's job is to figure out why and solve it before Jason becomes a threat. While talking to Jason, Aaron discovers that Lizzie also works at Meatbox and is part of Jason's team. As Aaron starts working on befriending Jason, Meatbox suffers fallout from his facial recognition system failing to recognize black faces, resulting in scores of black people getting locked out of their accounts. The company's owner Mick has a lackluster, indifferent response to the complaints. Eventually, Aaron discovers Jason's problem. He wants to be like Mick, and also wants to be with Lizzie. A twofold problem is unusual, but Roger tells Aaron to solve it anyway, which means Aaron can't date Lizzie since Jason also wants to date her. Aaron struggles with letting go of his feelings for Lizzie, his growing resentment towards Jason over Jason's obnoxious, selfish attitude, and the demands of the society. Meanwhile, Meatbox rolls out its new diversity policies. However, even though Lizzie led most of the changes, Jason is given the presenter role because he's deemed better suited. because he's white and male. Aaron bumps into Lizzie after this, cheers her up, and they almost kiss, but the society contacts Aaron. They've discovered that someone's broken the society's rules. All the members of the society lose their powers because their powers are collective. The powers only work if all members focus on serving their white charges and never make things about themselves. The penalty for breaking the rule is getting booted out of the society and having their minds erased of those events. The society views this as the greatest penalty because the person is now left to the whims of white people. Aaron thinks they've discovered what he just did with Lizzie, but it turns out the society is after another member of the group who also broke the rules. Following that, Aaron tries to keep his relationship with Lizzie as strictly friends. Jason calls Aaron to tell him about the presenter position and asks him to co-present. He also tells Aaron that he plans on asking Lizzie out after the presentation. This sends Aaron reeling, and he spends the morning of the presentation trying to contact Lizzie while ignoring Jason. Eventually, Jason finds Aaron, tells him Lizzie will be at the presentation, and right before he presents, tells Aaron that the reason he invited Aaron was for the appearance of diversity. On the other side of the stage, Lizzie motions for Aaron to go to the back so they can talk, but instead Aaron takes to the stage and unleashes on Jason, criticizing him for the diversity comment, criticizing the company's fake support of diversity, and venting about how he's felt as a biracial man in America. After that, he reveals his powers to Lizzie and teleports her to the top of the Chrysler building, but before they can kiss, Aaron gets teleported to the society where they strip him of his magic powers. Roger later tries to erase Aaron's memories, but it doesn't work. It appears Aaron's venting inspired the other magical Negroes to confront the society's rules, so their magic isn't working properly anymore. Roger then reminds Aaron about Lizzie. Aaron checks his phone and listens to the messages Lizzie left detailing her trip back to LA. When Aaron meets up with her, they kiss and walk off together, with Lizzie seemingly joking that, like Aaron, she's part of a magical society too. In the final scene, Lizzie goes into a salon which turns out to be the entrance for the Society of Supportive Wives and Girlfriends, implying that she's been doing for Aaron what Aaron was doing for Jason. Now, if that makes the movie sound interesting, I promise that my synopsis is way more exciting than what actually happens in the movie. The pacing in the movie is ridiculously slow. Watching something fall into a black hole would happen faster than anything in this movie. The runtime says 105 minutes, it felt more like 205. Why is the pacing so glacial? Because nothing happens. We don't see much magic, we don't see any anti-black racism, we don't see anyone trying to stop anything remotely serious. It's just very mundane. Another problem is the conflicting stories. There's a magical Negro story and the romance story, but they don't really impact each other. The bulk of the movie is about Aaron's interest in Lizzie. You could cut out the magical Negro story and the film would still work. Another problem is that Aaron's underlying issue isn't racism, but his lack of confidence. We don't see him experiencing any racism, but we do see him being a living doormat. No one pays attention to him. He doesn't stand up for himself. He's nervous, unsure, and shy. We're meant to interpret this as the impact racism has had on him. That's made clear in Aaron's rant at the end of the film, but nothing we see throughout the film justifies that. The only person Aaron seems comfortable with is Lizzie, and that's because, like he says in the film, she's genuinely interested in knowing him, not the idea of him, but who he really is. Of course, all that changes with the idea that Lizzie is part of some society where women act as emotional support. That's a weird way to undermine their romance, but that's technically what the plot point does. Speaking of undermining plot points, the biggest problem with the film is that it makes the American Society of Magical Negroes look like racist. The idea of the society is that they were created by slaves from Monticello to act as protectors of the race to prevent white people from attacking or killing black people. However, we never see anything like this in the film. The closest we ever get is when Roger talks about his father. His father was a shoe shine, and one day when Roger went to visit his father, he saw a white man spit on his father's head because the man thought his father hadn't put enough spit into the spit shine. Roger's father had a temper, so he expected his father to beat up the white man, but instead, he smiled. Roger went home and told his grandmother about the incident, and he resented his father for not fighting back. But his grandmother told him that if his father came back home alive and unharmed, there was nothing to resent. Now, I've heard that type of story my whole life. It's very common in the black community, because for a long time in the US, if a black person simply looked at a white person, that could have resulted in that black person being attacked or killed. We're talking about during slavery, post-slavery, through the civil rights movement, and well into modern times. There's some variation of this damn near every black person has heard. Looking at someone the wrong way, being in the wrong neighborhood, going into the wrong store, expressing the wrong opinion, talking to the wrong cop. Those events happen. They're less common today than they used to be, but every now and again they still do occur. So you would think the film would show something like this to justify the existence of the society and why these people literally believe that white discomfort would lead to black people's deaths. You know, like a modern Emmett Till situation. Something plausible, obviously bad, and clearly the result of white panic. But no. Instead, we get the opposite. The society has such animosity and fear towards white people that the members wind up looking like paranoid bigots because what they fear would happen never happens. That would be bad enough, but the film makes it worse by every act we do see between the races being the result of either an individual being a terrible person or a simple misunderstanding. For example, Mick, the owner of Meatbox, is just a self-centered douchebag. He doesn't care about anyone other than himself. It has nothing to do with his race because he treats his white employees terribly too. The cop that Aaron helps is supposed to be a threat, but we never see him do anything threatening. At best, he gets suspicious over Aaron and Roger just standing there staring at him for minutes, which would be a suspicious thing to do. Why are you just staring at the man? Then we have Jason, who's also a self-centered douchebag. There's a scene where he and Aaron are playing some virtual reality game, and Aaron tries to tell Jason about how Lizzie feels about not getting picked to present. When Jason says that Lizzie doesn't deserve it because if she did, she would have been picked, Aaron tries and fails to get Jason to consider what it would be like if he was deliberately not given the position, and what it would be like if he didn't have the confidence to stand up for himself and demand the role. Jason, like many people obsessed with meritocracy, simply doesn't believe that could happen to him or anyone else, so he rejects the idea in the most dickish way possible. That pisses off Aaron because he's not just talking about Lizzie but also himself, and Jason is supposed to be his friend and understand the situation, but he isn't acting like that. Okay, fine, that's a perfectly fair point, but what does that have to do with race? The implication is that Jason thinks this way because he's white, but there's nothing supporting that in the film. He just comes across as obnoxious, selfish, and entitled. If we're meant to think that this has something to do with his race, we have to see that, but the film doesn't show anything like that, which is why the climax of the film winds up being a contradictory mess. In the climax of the film, Aaron confronts Jason about his diversity comment. It's understandable that Aaron is angry about it because it comes across as an offensive and dismissive thing to say to someone who's supposed to be your friend. However, Aaron quickly shifts from complaining about the comment to venting about how he's felt his whole life about his race. He talks about things Jason hasn't done to him. At no point has Jason belittled Aaron, othered him, or judged him about his race. No one at Meatbox has questioned whether Aaron belongs at the company, whether he has a right to speak, or even said anything about his right to exist. But that's where Aaron goes. He gives this impassioned rant about feeling invisible and not belonging and not being heard and being put upon by white people, which makes Jason say that he's not racist, and that opens up a whole new angle for Aaron to explore, where he claims he's not accusing Jason of being racist, as he totally accuses Jason of being racist. Aaron unleashes every black grievance on Jason, even though the man hasn't done any of those things Aaron mentions. The irony is that towards the end, Jason says, "I didn't know you felt like that." In any other circumstance, that would be the point where the main character would stop and acknowledge that sometimes people don't know how other people feel, so what may look intentional may just be a misunderstanding. But that's not the message writer-director Kobe Libby wanted to express, so the element gets ignored. However, it's key to many racial issues. Sometimes it is just a misunderstanding. That was the whole point of the ATM scene. The woman and her friends misunderstood what happened and drew the wrong conclusion about Aaron. That's presented as bad, but Aaron's misunderstanding of Jason is presented as righteous indignation for something the man didn't even do. And the last part is important, because when we look at the film, everything we see about Jason would imply that he didn't actually mean for his diversity comment to sound racist. It appears that what he meant was that he brought Aaron to show that the company was committed to diversity. However, the way Jason said the line could be taken as racist. It's simply a misunderstanding, much like what happens in a lot of instances of white people overreacting to black people. Now, why that happens is up for grabs. It could be due to racism, due to ignorance, due to arrogance, or to the person being a jerk. The point is that the film inadvertently makes Aaron look like the douchebag because he misunderstands what happened and won't take a moment to consider the possibility that maybe he got it wrong. And in all of this, I'm still wondering, where is the satire? The film isn't funny. Fine. It doesn't have to be funny to be a satire, although it does need to be funny to be a comedy. But where is the critique? Where is the biting analysis common to satire? Some biracial dude vented for 10 minutes about not fitting in does not a satire make. It seems like this film was really about a guy coping with his lack of confidence due to his mixed race, and his struggle to find a way to fit in and feel seen for who he is by someone. Now, I don't want to get too personal, but Kobe Libby is biracial, and many stories like this tend to be self-inserts, so I can't help but think that's what happened here. It also feels like the story Libby wanted to tell was the romance between Aaron and Lizzie. and he tacked on the magical Negro trope because he wanted to use it somewhere, but didn't have anywhere else to use it, and maybe because he wanted to validate his black cred. Like I said, I don't want to get too personal, but that does tend to be why people write stories this way. Obviously, I don't recommend watching this movie. It's not very good, but if you feel the need to watch it, do it in the middle of the day when you're wide awake, and take breaks, because you will need them. If you've forgotten how long it felt waiting for your lunch period back in grade school, well, this movie will help remind you. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.